Aloha, my name is Julie Mitchell, and I'm the Executive Director here at Kuikahi Mediation Center. And to tell you a little bit about ourselves, we're a nonprofit community mediation center serving East Hawaii. We're one of 5 in the state. We got our start back in 1983 as a program of the Island of Hawaii YMCA, and we became our own independent nonprofit in 2006. So we've been around for 38 years this year. Our mission is to empower people to come together, to talk and to listen, to explore options and to find their own best solutions. And to achieve this mission, we offer mediation, facilitation, and training like this one to strengthen the ability of diverse individuals and groups to resolve interpersonal conflicts and community issues. This Brown Bag Lunch series is held every third Thursday at 12 noon on Zoom, and you have to register on Eventbrite each time to get the link for the following months. And you can also register for more than one at a time. I would like to tell you about an exciting event that we have coming up on December 1st from 1 to 3 p.m. We're hosting a free workshop on Zoom entitled Making Peace with Conflict, Self-Discovery and Community Building with Lolo Haha. He's from Oregon. And he asks, how might our world change if we could lean into conflict more boldly and see conflict as an opportunity for self-discovery and community building? Ha'a is a counselor, equity consultant, conflict mediator, and social justice theater director. And as I mentioned, he's based in Portland. So if you'd like to join Lolo for his interactive 2-hour workshop and learn how to view conflict as an opportunity, identify tools to approach conflict from this new perspective, and process your personal barriers to approaching conflict, we would love to have you. I'm going to put a link to sign up in the chat. And then because you signed up for this event, you'll also get emails announcing it. At the end of our talk today, we're going to ask you to fill out a short online survey, which helps with our grant funding for this free series. And when I put the survey link in the chat, all you have to do is click into it, and it'll go to a few questions. And if you share our thoughts, it really helps. It helps us know what other kinds of talks you'd like to hear going forward. I will send an email out later with this video link, as well as the handout that was provided to most of you in advance, but we know some of you signed up after that went out. If you're not sure we have your email, you can send a private chat to me, giving me the email address in case you, I don't know, are watching this with a friend. If you like our talk, please feel to register for more in the future. Our next speaker next month on November 18th is Jani Shepherd, and she is going to be presenting on the topic, Balancing the 60-Hour Work Week, Celebrating Self-Care. That'll be perfect just before the Thanksgiving holiday. And again, I'm going to put a link to that topic and how to register in the chat. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker today. We are lucky to have Kimberly Dark, who consulted in conflict resolution and facilitation for over 20 years. She is an award-winning author and storyteller who works to reveal the hidden architecture of everyday life so that we can reclaim our power as social creators. Her ability to make the personal political is grounded in her training as a sociologist, and she teaches in sociology at Cal State San Marcos and in writing arts at Cal State Summer Arts. And Kimberly lives here on Hawaii Island, and we are lucky enough to have her with us today. So please do take it away, Kimberly.
Hey, thanks, Julie. Well, it's always a pleasure to be here with y'all, and I see some people that I know, and so that's great too. We're going to talk about conflict. We're going to talk about conflict resolution. And I sent out a really basic handout to you about understanding conflict in community settings. If you don't have that yet, it's totally fine. You're going to follow along just fine. But I want to just point out a few things. I don't even think I'm going to share the screen with you because most of you have it, and it's pretty simple stuff I'm going to point out. But just as a basic way of thinking about issues that cause conflict, You know, dualistic thinking is not our friend. Things are either right or wrong, and you know, black and white, like just that there is one way of doing things and everything else is wrong. But this is a really prevalent thing, and it's going to come up in what I'm discussing today. So, yeah, you may have heard this kind of thinking before, that conflicts generally occur over three categories of issues: either resources, needs, or values. So the first one, resources, is like tangible equipment. It's like office space. It's like services or territory or stuff. Measurable resources, things like that. And it seems like a lot of potential conflicts in community settings deal with resources, but it's not always the case, because people got other stuff behind those issues. Conflicts over needs and values often underlie those issues. So need refers to the human element of conflict, kind of like needs for safety or respect or acceptance or privacy, or, you know, whatever those items might be, being treated fairly, having access to services, all of that. But conflict over values goes deeper still. Now, these are the most difficult to resolve because they represent a person's sense of what is right and wrong, what's good and bad. And like I said, dichotomous thinking like that is generally not our friend. So when the underlying issue is one of values, then oftentimes we get into deep, thorny territory that is difficult to navigate. And some of what I'm going to comment on today is sort of about our meta narratives about conflict, and whether those serve our ability to solve conflict or not. Like, is it possible to change some of those meta narratives about conflict so that we have a better chance of, you know, of resolving conflict? So I'm just giving you the highlights of this handout. Like I said, these are concepts many of you I know are already aware of. The handout also references William Ury, who's written a great deal about conflict and negotiation. And he talks about, you know, power, rights, and interests. And of course, power is like the use of authority, verbal or physical strength, psychological manipulation. All of those things can be like, we're going to solve this problem through my power over you. That's one way to do it. And actually, in a lot of ways in our culture, we use that one more often than we realize we do. Rights-based approaches are about rules and laws and, you know, the ways that people agree to live. So, you know, a lot of times people will say, well, I have the right to do that. You know, this is this kind of thinking. And, you know, we live in a culture that encourages rights-based thinking because we have laws and we have courts and we have, you know, ways of handling things that way. Now, I'm not telling any of you anything new when I say interest-based approaches have a different goal than the other two, and they are, you know, the kind of the best way for people to decide for themselves what kind of solution is going to help them. So mediation is based on this interest-based idea. So these are problem-solving methods that focus on future behaviors rather than just past occurrences. So the past can provide some instruction for understanding the present, but the past does not, you know, totally decide how we're going to act in the future. And that is, that's a beautiful thing, right? So, you know, individuals can come together to answer the question, where can or should we go from here? All right, so I know I've not said anything radical to anybody yet. but I think it's important to just sort of think through, like, what are we talking about? Like, what is conflict in its broadest sense, and how do we generally resolve it? Okay, so you may have noticed that we live in interesting times, especially with the prevalence of social media. it is very easy to draw lines about who we do and don't like, what we will and won't tolerate, and to draw them really quickly without a whole lot of discernment, without a whole lot of, thinking through, oh, what have I just done by excluding this person from my social media page? Or what have I just done by, sometimes those things have real life consequences. Not just because they exclude people that might be hurt by, that exclusion in real life, but also because that ability to exclude people quickly starts to constrain the way we think about conflict. It starts to kind of warp our ability to have civil discourse, right? So by simply saying, click, I should not have to tolerate that, it forgoes any kind of civil discourse that might be had about a certain topic. So listen, I'm not trying to tell you not to make your social media page a comfy, cozy place where everyone agrees with you, because that's what the majority of us really want to do on social media. And I'm not telling you that's bad. But I am suggesting that we pay attention to how we consider or negate other people's views and actions, how we do that in our regular everyday lives, because it has not just that impact on the individual relationship, but also on the meta narratives, the broader scaffolding for how we understand and deal with conflict. Okay, so hey, a few years ago, Sarah Schulman wrote this book, Conflict is Not Abuse, which, I recommend to you, and I recommend it to lots of people. The subtitle here for this book is kind of what we're talking about today, is Overstating Harm, Community Responsibility, and the Duty for Repair. So let me tell you how I understand this, this subtitle, because it is the thing we're discussing right now. So sometimes, and I think this is fueled by the fact that we have this quick negate or eliminate option through, social media nowadays. Sometimes we start to view people who disagree with us as abusive to us. Now, sometimes they are abusive to us, right? Like in social media is a really great way to see this, that sometimes people are not very skillful when they say, I have a friend from high school who, I'm still friends with on social media, and he honestly cannot see how referring to people who vote for Democrats as libtards, he honestly cannot see how that is insulting. Like I have addressed this as a meta issue so many times with him, saying yes, but surely you can see that this word, well, right, this is what I'm talking about, right? So sometimes you might say, well, that is abusive language, and I do not wish to be, available to abusive language. Fair enough. But how often are we describing what is basically conflict at its root as abuse? And when we frame conflict as abuse, a whole lot of other things follow logically, like I want to excise that person out of my life, that might not follow if we thought to ourselves, well, that is a person with whom I have a conflict, rather than that is a person who is abusing me. Is this making sense so far? Does anyone want to ask something or say something about the idea of conflict versus abuse? Because I'll just keep talking and then we'll say some more later. Okay. So the subtitle of this book talks about overstating harm, community responsibility, and the duty for repair. So I love this idea of the duty to repair. That when we live in close proximity to other people, I mean, gosh, the best example of this are people who are neighbors. Sure, neighbors change, but you almost never have any control over who moves in next to you. Like, those are accidental alliances that you need to choose how to relate to, right? And you can't just, not as easy as like pushing a button to delete somebody from your friend list, especially if that person bought that house and is planning on, staying there their whole lives. So what is the duty to repair if we are going to be constantly in close proximity to one another? Here's the main thing that I think framing conflict as abuse robs from us. It is the ability to feel that we are powerful to change things. If I think about myself as being abused, it's like it immediately frames the other person as having power over me. They're harming me. But if I frame what we are engaged in as a two-party conflict, we both have the power to change it. Right? I have the power to change it by not accepting abusive language, by setting clear boundaries. I am changing the dynamic by doing that. I am also able to look for different ways to intervene with that conflict in interesting ways. So here we are. Since I brought up the neighbors example, I'm going to give you an example of a conflict that I had with a neighbor a few years ago. So I had a neighbor on my block who, they were loud. And some neighbor, I wasn't particularly bothered by it, but some other neighbors were bothered by it and started yelling at them and calling them names and basically alienating this couple that lived on this block. And in turn, they turned the music up and put up some more like roofing material around their house as a barricade, as a fence. It was like that. And then they spray painted some things I won't even repeat here, some very, very nasty things on, a big board, and put it out in front of their house. Now, now when that happened, I thought, okay, these people are now in conflict with me. Like, I don't want to see that stuff written out there on a board in front of their house. I also am concerned about children walking by seeing that stuff in particular. I also am concerned about the fact that they are insulting a certain group of people with those epithets, and I don't want that. I don't want that in my neighborhood. So my thought was, what have I done so far in this relationship before all of this hoo-ha brewed up? Well, you know what? I actually didn't go and meet them when they first moved in, even though they lived 3 doors down. I didn't do that. I consider that a failure on my part, right? Because like at this point, if I go over there, I don't even, like, I knew the guy's name because people have been talking about him, but I didn't even know the woman's name. So, this is an issue. I did find out though that she was pregnant. And so that turned into an entry point that I had some traction with. Right. I had purchased some things from when my grandson visited. He was 2 years old when he first came over here. And I still had like a playpen and a little baby gate, So I went over there with those things and I said, hey, I heard that you're having a new baby. Congratulations. Do you happen to need this stuff? Because I'd be happy to give it to you. My grandson will be older by the time he gets back here. And so do you see that by not feeling abused by those people, and especially that sign they put up, that sign they put up, I'm part of the group they were insulting. And so it could have been, I could have taken that as abuse. I could have taken that as a direct affront toward me. But I didn't, right? I looked for, what can I do to shift this dynamic? So while I was standing out there in the street offering these items, I met the people, I talked to them about the baby, I talked to them about my son and about, childbirth, and you know how you do, right? Once you get on this topic of having babies, you got something to discuss. And I just casually referenced the sign and I said, hey, I got to tell you that I don't like seeing that out on the street here. I mean, what do kids think when they walk by and see that? And like you're trying to offend a whole big group of people. I did not comment on me being one of those people that they were trying to offend. I don't even know if they knew that. But you know what? At that point, the guy seemed embarrassed about the sign. And that is a very different entry point for change than the one that we started out with. And within the week, they had taken the sign away. The music was still blaring, but you know what? The sign going away was the big thing I was concerned with in any case. So this is just an example of, could I have felt abused by that sign? Yeah, I absolutely could have. But by framing that interaction as a conflict in which I participated minimally, of course, by never introducing myself to those neighbors, I regained my power to do something different, right? So that is a meta construct that allows for action to occur, as opposed to victimization, which means I am the person in danger. Somebody else needs to intervene in order to solve this problem. So I want to just tell you, part of what she does in this book is to take on some really big issues that that are surprising. For instance, she talks about domestic violence, which is a situation that we often think of in terms of perpetrator victim. But she says, what if we change this meta narrative about, is it abuse or is it conflict, and start to look at, what if both parties are powerful and able to change the situation? Also, at what point do we need to call external intervention? That there may be lots of little places ahead of the physical violence where conflict resolution would be effective. Think about that. Like, it's a radical idea to say, oh, because my goodness, like, I'm in the camp that believes we don't have enough services to deal with domestic violence. But if we think about what are the moments before there is actual violence where people could conceive of themselves as powerful and able to change the situation before an external person is called in, that's powerful. It's a powerful idea. So let me pause again. I've said a bunch of stuff again, and see if there's anything you have a question about, or if you would like to bring up your own example of this kind of meta framing of conflict. How do we think about conflict as solvable versus an intractable victim perpetrator situation?
Kimberly, there's a question in the chat that I'd like to read to you. Says, how do you handle a friend who keeps saying that you are biased if you disagree with her position on a specific issue? How do you handle a friend who keeps saying that you are biased if you disagree with her position on a specific issue?
Thank you. And thank you, Julie, for bringing stuff up in the chat. I am not good at talking and looking over. There's some people are so good at that on Zoom. Have you noticed that? Like they can be talking and reading and like, I can't do it. So I appreciate that. So listen, the first thing I would do in that situation is to come up with a definition of bias that both of you can be comfortable with. Maybe not agree on, but be comfortable with. Right? Because in that situation, the term bias needs to be defined. So that's the first step. And once you've got a situation where bias has been defined, because, this is tricky, right? Like we want to be able to have civil discourse, especially in public places, and online counts. But at the same time, it is not an equal opinion if one of those views diminishes the humanity of the other, right? So look, if I keep saying like, gay people should have equal protection under the law, and the other person is saying, well, no, I mean, gay people should really just, they can change if they want equal protection, and that's my view. Well, that's diminishing. It is basically saying you are not equal to me, right? Those are not views that are, that can be discussed in exactly the same way. So if you can figure out what bias means, then there's a way to move forward with that conversation. And it's not that somebody who believes that someone has less humanity should be dismissed entirely, but that should be handled for what it is, that those are not just equal benign opinions. One of them actually has an impact on how someone is able to live their lives. Oh. I can see that somebody is just asking about this book again. Sarah Schulman, Conflict is Not Abuse. And maybe if somebody could write that in the chat, that would be great, or even put a link for
it. It's in the chat.
Perfect. So let me tell you, was there anything else right now? I'm going to shift gears just ever so slightly.
There's commentary in the chat, but I think that people can read that if they would like to. It's not really a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're an incredibly civil bunch, so please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question when you need to. You don't need to go through the hand raising. Yeah, Charlene. Oh, I can't hear you, even though it looks like you're unmuted.
You may need to take your headset out, Charlene, for us to hear you, and pull it out of your computer and try it without.
Sorry.
Oh, I just heard you a little bit just then.
Jeez, I'm so sorry.
Mm.
No, we don't have you, Charlene. Sorry. Oh, I see what she's saying. She was pointing to something in the chat, I think. Okay, she's saying, this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Generally, domestic violence goes to court, except when the violent act is acknowledged by the perpetrator. What is your position about these types of violent physical interactions?
Yeah, I did not prep to talk to you about domestic violence today as one of the topics covered by this book. I recommend this book because it has some very challenging views on all of these topics, but I don't think she is not trying to say that courts should not intervene when violence has occurred. That's not it. She's trying to explore how we conceive of ourselves as victims versus as participants in a conflict. And then all of the ways that that creates factioning around us by the people that we know. So for instance, with domestic violence, part of Sarah Schulman's thesis is that we tend to think about ourselves as being good allies to somebody who is in a hard relationship when we immediately rush to our person and say, I believe everything you say. And, he's terrible and you need to get away from him and this and this and this. That may be true, but that is a very different thing than if your friends and family commit to helping you solve the conflict, rather than just always say, I will always take your side, right? Like we hear this a lot, and it means that people are being good friends. And it means that, like, you're my daughter, I will always love you. Well, okay, but what if you're my daughter, so I'm going to try and help you see how you provoke somebody who is already potentially violent. It's not that the violence is ever condoned or thought of as right, but how do we frame ourselves, and how does that cause us to draw in support? And what does that support look like? So that's really the thing that she's talking about, and more. Like I said, I didn't prep to talk to you about domestic violence specifically today, but I appreciate the question, Charlene. I don't think anyone is suggesting that those cases shouldn't go to court and there shouldn't be intervention. There absolutely should, but as we know, there are thousands of moments that are not violent in a relationship that lead to a place where violence occurs. And some of those moments are happening before the relationship ever started. They're happening, like the whole idea that male violence is a giant social pattern that we don't discuss as a pattern, because, the first thing somebody says when you talk about male violence as a pattern, well, but women are violent too. Obviously, every human has that capacity, but what is it that keeps us from focusing on a social pattern? Well, I think that Schulman would say it's the victim perpetrator mentality. Whereas if we look at what is the society allow, which conflicts are we allowed to solve, and which ones are just sort of, we live with this because that's just how it is. That's just how, men are perpetrators and women are victims. Schulman says, no, we are humans involved in conflict. And that is a different orientation. Yes, I see a hand. Go ahead, David.
What I'm hearing though is, and I see this in mediation sometimes, people come to the table and they work through some things that goes through vulnerability. They have an involvement in the outcome, and there's some resiliency in their outcome, in their agreement. What I'm gathering, what I think I'm hearing from you potentially is if it's defined as abuse and and somebody external makes a decision, the buy-in to the solution may not be as strong if it's defined as a conflict, and I have the ability to help create that solution.
Exactly. Yes. Yes to all of that.
Thank you.
All right. So what I want to talk a little bit more about now is understanding the difference between abuse, conflict, and resistance, right? Resistance to doing that, and also using communication skills to evolve meaning about the issue rather than just stating your case. And so that is kind of an important thing, right? That often when we just state our case, we become stuck in our own viewpoint on that thing. But if we are using communication skills to evolve conflict, to evolve meaning, we have a possibility of coming to different conclusions about what are we even doing here, right? And opening possibilities. So some of this some of this is also, it is important also to choose not to escalate small conflicts. So let me just say that again and relate it back to what I'm talking about here. So the victim perpetrator mentality is often fueled by the fact that people escalate small conflicts that perhaps do not need to be escalated. Yeah. And if we conceive of ourselves as a person who's having a conflict with another, then it's like clearly not in our self-interest to escalate a small conflict. But if we are using conflict to establish an identity as someone who is abused, then suddenly you are looking for every small conflict that has ever happened around that issue so that you can build your case for other people to see you as the victim. So I want to say a lot of people did that with that neighbor example that I was just telling you about earlier. I can't tell you how often I deflected. Like I said, the noise thing didn't bother me so much. And so for a long time, I was hearing from other neighbors about, oh, the noise, it's terrible. And that guy, he doesn't even, he wears like a dirty t-shirt and he doesn't even I don't think he's feeding his dog. And I'm like, wait, what? Wait, the fact that the t-shirt he's wearing is relevant to this. Like this is an example of escalating a conflict in a way that is just not even helpful. Not even helpful. But it can definitely rein in additional neighbors to agree that you are being abused by this horrible, loud person who is now a monster rather than a human being that you are simply in a conflict with. All right, let me just talk through some ways to use communication to evolve meaning rather than I have too many things open on my desktop. Does that ever happen to you? Let me see here. So communication skills that evolve meaning, and I think that's going to be a good way to spend the rest of our time together. And then for some of these other ideas, I realize they're kind of big concepts that I'm just opening up and leaving them there. But I'm going to recommend the book because I love a book. I don't know about you, but I love a book that opens up concepts that I can't easily close again. Right? We want to sometimes seek out these big thinking kind of texts. All right, some of this I bet is going to sound familiar to you all. I'm going to just talk through some communication skills that evolve meaning. One of them is asking open-ended questions to prompt accounts of what happened and to promote goodwill. So a question like, how did that come to be is so much more powerful than why did you do that? Right? So open-ended questions that are specifically trying to prompt accounts and promote goodwill. It's a wonderful tool. Also asking questions that explore motivation as opposed to expecting that there's a simple answer for why somebody did something. Also listening calmly and de-escalating your own physical cues when possible. So that includes, the tight jaw, the tight shoulders, the calm breath, the way that we are able to sit with our hands not balled up when we talk to other people. Also acknowledging emotion without validating or invalidating it. Hey, are these starting to sound a lot like the skills you learn as mediators? Some of you probably are feeling like that. And it's true. These are also mediation skills. So acknowledging emotion without validating or invalidating it means that this is a habit I have a lot. When I listen, I nod. Well, that's tricky, right? If you want to acknowledge somebody without trying to validate them, you got to get that under control a little bit. It also is helpful to take breaks when needed, acknowledge your own emotions, your own cues, acknowledging that something feels funny, even when you can't name it, is also super powerful, right? One of the ways to evolve meaning is to acknowledge something is happening and to allow the discussion about it to bring new meaning into the room, as opposed to, you don't have to name something all the time. Also, avoiding asynchronous communication when possible. So that means texting, email, stuff on social media, not so great an idea if there's already conflict. So in-person communication or the phone or the video call, those things are synchronous. You're both there in real time, and you have a sense, even in a phone call, you have a sense of emotional stress or well-being from the person that, you know, that you're talking to. So yeah, in order to evolve meaning or transform information, it is more helpful to have that immediate return of information. Also, paying attention with goodwill to real-time nuance and personal cues that emerge in a discussion. Specifically, like also allowing yourself to pause or joke or lean in or consider, you know, what is happening. Like, you know, like, I don't know, you can feel it in your body sometimes that you need to just like go like this and like, and then you can like listen better. Like we need to pay attention to that stuff with ourselves as well, rather than just constantly monitoring others. I mean, it's all happening for us too at the same time. It's also okay to refuse communication if it doesn't feel like the timing is going to be conducive to success. So that is an important thing. Demands or ultimatums are not so helpful. So when you refuse communication, you put forth some terms for repair. So it's not just like an outright refusal. I'm not talking to you right now, and then you storm off. It's more like, I don't think now is the time to talk about this. Can we make an appointment, or can we have a phone call next week? I mean, to say like, here is the path to repair as I see it, is a powerful thing. And then of course, you know, those terms may not be met, but then you're in a place where both parties can discuss that, rather than one party making a demand and the other one just having to say yes or no. Also, I talked a little bit about this with Rue when we discussed domestic violence, but wow. Seeking friends and family that support repair rather than supporting isolation. So isolation is that thing that happens when you start to frame yourself as the abused party who needs to be cut off from that other person and anybody who supports that other person, right? Suddenly there is isolation. But wow, if your friends and family support that, then what you've got now are two factions. And that is a really different conflict, right, to handle than if there's two individuals that are in conflict. So yeah, seeking friends and families who support repair rather than isolation is so much better to have a friend who prompts your best skills rather than just agreeing with you all the time that you have been wronged. You have been so wronged, you know. And it's creepy that we think of this as good friendship, right? It's actually not so helpful. All right, I'm going to just say a couple of more because I know we're coming toward the end, and I'll bet some more people have some things in the chat. So embrace nuance and complexity. Stay in the moment rather than, you know, saying what you think you're supposed to say or the thing that you always say. You know, this is about staying in the moment and then looking toward the future, as opposed to always operating out of past patterns and traumas and emotions. And then maybe this is a good one to leave you with. Acknowledge that having the ability to punish someone, and remember, that is a power-based approach to conflict resolution or even a rights-based approach to conflict resolution. But if you acknowledge that having the ability to punish someone does not take away the responsibility to look at your own role in the conflict, then you're not setting yourself up for future success, right? So there's another way to say this. That's like, just because you can win doesn't mean you're right. Like, just because, you know, like sometimes, and I think sometimes attorneys or, you know, the courts will prompt us to think that way. We'll say, but, you know, because the question is always like, okay, can we win this? Well, but wait a minute, if what we want is like lasting peace in a situation, then really both parties need to be able to look at responsibility for ending up in the place that you've ended up. And I'm not saying you shouldn't use the court system, but I am saying look at the kind of thinking that that system engenders and ask yourself, is that going to lead to further conflict or repair? So I know I've just said a lot of things. What's in the chat that is useful or interesting in these last few minutes together?
One interesting comment sort of string, I'll bring it up. One person commented that the Cartman drama triangle with victim, rescuer, and perpetrator seems related to this subject. And then another person shared that in restorative justice often invites the reconciler to be present instead of the rescuer. So maybe you want to comment on that.
Oh, I really do want to comment on restorative justice and transformative justice for a moment, because those ways of thinking have a place in this conversation for sure. The idea with restorative justice that it is possible to come back to, or transformative justice, that it is possible to come back to a place not just where everyone is satisfied with the outcome of that one conflict, but where people genuinely feel safe and comfortable with one another again. I think that is definitely what Sarah Schulman is talking about in this book, and also what we're working toward when we think about, you know, deciding to be a person in conflict rather than a person being abused in, you know, in a conflict situation. So yeah, for sure. And, you know, I would like to know more about the Cartman drama triangle, but just on the face of it, it definitely looks like that is related. And yes, the reconciler is, you know, much like the facilitator in a mediation. It is much, the thinking is that I'm not here to rescue anyone from this terrible situation. I'm here to remind you all that you have the power to make a new way. And so to sum up, like if there is a way to sum up all of these things that I've shared with you in this the last little bit of time, how we conceive of our own role is so important to what opportunities we have for repair. And that really is, you know, the big message, I think, in considering the responsibility for repair. And you know, like, what does it mean to have some community responsibility to repair things? That it matters how we think of ourselves, how we think of our roles. And you know, I got to tell you, when I realized that, like I went looking for it, I was like, where is my bad neighbor role in that story that I told you? And when I found it, I immediately felt like I had more power. I immediately felt like, okay, now what do I want to do? That sign over there has got to go. That was like my deeper feeling. But you know, the other thing was, wow, I never put forth some goodwill that I could have. I also want to say I'm better at that now. Like after having had that experience, I'll walk on next door with some cookies, you know, the last neighbors I had move in, and, you know, I invited them over for some tea because I feel a responsibility to repair. And that is before there is any conflict present. So how we conceive of ourselves is powerful in how we resolve conflict or avoid it entirely.
I think we might have time for one more question. And here's one that says, sometimes conflict is not abuse. Sometimes abuse is abuse. How do you tell the difference?
Oh, I hope you read this book, and I hope that you have some more conversations about that. Because I'm going to tell you, Sarah Schulman takes some things that you definitely, I mean, like I said, these examples range from domestic violence to the Israel-Palestine conflict. I mean, she's looking at, she's not holding back with difficult examples. and so how can you tell the difference? It's a complex question. I think though that just because, how do I want to say this? I'm going to go back to my summary statement again, which is just because you feel maybe you have been abused, right? Does not mean that that exempts you from thinking of what is your role in this. And the ability to win doesn't make you right, but you know, that doesn't mean that you tolerate abuse. And so how do we navigate? Like there's some ambiguity there to be held, right? So how do we hold that ambiguity and keep ourselves safe? Setting clear boundaries is a great idea. And, you know, not tolerating abuse is a great idea. Again, though, if that is a person that you want an ongoing relationship with, or that you have to have one with because you work with them or they live next door, then you have to frame yourself as a person who can actively create solutions. So that is what I will leave you with today. And yeah, thanks. And, you know, I mean, you just be endlessly grateful to the Mediation Center because they're going to help you with these solutions. And probably help you reframe yourself again and again when you need it. You know, it's a wonderful thing.
So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. And to Kimberly, we'll do that in a minute. I did put in the chat box a link to a short online survey. So if you don't mind to do that, it would be really great. I'll put it in again so it kind of stays at the bottom. So if you click into that, answer a couple questions for us. We do compile them. We do share them with our speakers so they can know what you liked about their talk, and they use it to make tweaks to them too. I've seen a lot of presenters actually actively use what has been shared, and we want to know what you think, what else you'd like to see us talk about. Please do check your emails. We'll probably send something out shortly that has the Zoom link for this video, and including the one sheet handout that some of you didn't get if you registered after we sent that email out. I'd like to ask everyone to please give a big round of applause for our virtual applause, Zoom applause for for Kimberly for joining us, and for you folks to taking an hour out of your busy days to be here. So we hope you'll come back next month for Janie Shepherd, who's going to be talking about self-care for those of us, myself included, who are workaholics. So please do join us. And again, on December 1st, we are going to be having a free workshop called Making Peace with Conflict, Self-Discovery, and Community Building with Lolo Haha. So I invite you to sign up for that as well. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you come in. So thanks for being with us today. Please do the survey. Kimberly, do you want to leave us with any last words of wisdom?
Can't even, oh, I thought I was muted there for a moment. I don't think so. I just want to be grateful for the fact that y'all keep doing these community meetings. That's wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, thanks everyone. Have a great day.